So I kind of assume that. So I kind of know where we're going with this. We're all into CrossFit, which means we're all kind of looking for the same thing, but we're probably going through some kind of joint pain. Maybe it's chronic, maybe it happened in a split moment. Either way, there's a really good chance that there's some kind of deficit somewhere in our bodies that created a compensation in that joint, and that's why it occurred. So really quick, what I wanted to go through was kind of why this happens. That way you guys have a little bit of background, and I don't just leave you here with stuff to do, but I actually give you kind of the why behind the what. So when it comes to movement, what we want is more efficiency so that we can create more output. That's very easy to understand when it comes to CrossFit, especially when we talk about things like overhead squats, which we just did a couple days ago, and I'm sure some of you guys remember that pain of going through, what was it, 21:15:9 overhead squats? Because, right, sure was, because every time you do that overhead squat, you had multiple joints going through full range of motion, and chances were that you had one joint that didn't have its full range are very high, which means it put a big kink in that hose, in that chain, and it forced you to compensate and round forward, and then it made it really hard to draw that bar over your center of gravity, and it made it really hard to perform that exercise. Does that make sense? So if my ankle, my hip, my T-spine, my shoulder, or my wrist had some kind of compensation because they didn't have the full range of motion, that bar started tipping forward, my body had to work really hard to keep it over my midline. And over my midline is where I'm the strongest. Out here, not so strong. Now I have to use a lot of arms and a lot of my back to keep that bar from falling in front of me. So we want to make you as efficient as possible so that those movements become much easier. The overhead squat is a really good example, but it even goes as far as doing gymnastics movements like a handstand push-up, and it translates to all those things. So we want you to be efficient, we want your joints to be moving well so that it makes everything feel much easier. An overhead squat, going back to this one more time, the weight was 155 for guys, 105 for girls, right? Maybe 115?
It was 105, but I did not do it.
Right, exactly. And the difference wasn't your strength. So you didn't do 105. Can you push press 105? Yeah, we'll just say definitely to that question. All right, so if you can press 105 and you can front squat 105, why can't you just put it over your head and overhead squat 105?
Because I'm in balance.
You have imbalance. That's why you're here. Exactly. So it wasn't the weight. It wasn't your strength. It was just that one of these joints wasn't working nicely, and it was putting a kink in that chain. It was making it much harder, and like we were just saying, you were compensating in some way, and some stuff had to work really hard to keep that weight over your body. It wasn't your strength whatsoever. It wasn't anything to do with your muscles. It was just your efficiency. Okay, so that's the whole point of this seminar, is to make you more efficient so that you can put out more work. More work meaning more weight, more reps in a shorter amount of time, more volume in a day. Whatever it is that's your goal, we're going to get you there by making you more efficient. Yeah, feel free to sit down, whatever you want. Kneel, whatever's most comfortable. So, number one, we're going to eliminate this thing that we call the buffer zone. So the buffer zone is the difference between how much I can get my joints into a position by just passively getting there, and how much I can actively control my joints. So Trent's going to come over here. He's going to show you how high he can passively lift his leg without compensating another joint. So just make sure when I lift your leg, this one doesn't bend. Okay, so give me one leg. All right, so he can passively go without falling. Here, hold this. Gotta work on your balance, bro. All right, so he can passively go right about here. All right, you guys see where that's at? A little bit above 90 degrees. All right, that was a heavy leg. Now, he can actively lift to just short of 90. All right, so just below his hip. The buffer zone, give me your leg again. Active, passive, that's the buffer zone. The buffer zone is that little bit of difference between how much I can assist him into a position versus how much he can actively control the position. So, how that translates to CrossFit. I've got a barbell. I'm going into, something we do all the time, front squats. I'm gonna use that pattern all the time in a power clean, squat clean, front squat, a thruster. We do this position all the time. Does my T-spine, elbow, and wrist have the mobility to get here actively? Do I have this range? Or am I using a big heavy weight to passively jam myself into the range? You probably know the answer for yourself when I say that, because you probably know how your wrists feel when they're doing things like thrusters. If your wrists hurt when you're doing things like thrusters, or maybe a handstand push-up, because you're jamming your wrist into the position, you know the answer for yourself. You know you have more passive than you do active, because afterwards your body tells you, it sends you the signal, ouch, that hurt. You jammed me in the position. I didn't have the prerequisite to do that. So we're trying to create this whole thing that's we call it the prerequisite. We want you to have this active range of motion in the position that we're gonna put you in, so that your body has all of the structural integrity to handle that load, not just you forcing it into the position. So if that leg raise that Trent showed us just now translates into something like, say, a deadlift, he's going to load only this far into his hips because he only had this much motion. The way he's going to get down, the rest of the way the floor is, he's probably going to compensate down for his back. We need more active range so that we don't compensate somewhere else. All right? So we're going to give you this active range of motion by forcing you to become stronger in these positions. We're not just going to stretch and hang out and breathe, although that can be something that you can do. It just takes more time to create more flexibility. We're going to ask you to become stronger in these end ranges of motion so that you can control each part of your movement. Okay. All right. Moving on to the next quick point here is, what is tightness? Does anyone kind of want to give me what they think tightness is? Because I know you felt it. So what is it in your mind, like, what's tightness? Tension. Tension. So tension, like when I go into this, would you call this like a tight, when I do this, I feel a lot of tension in my hamstrings. From me doing this to Joe Schmo on the street that's never stretched a day in their life, let's say this person sits all the time, they feel the same amount of tension in their hamstrings, but they have less range of motion. So is tightness like shorter muscle, or do you think it's something else? Yeah. Shorter tendons? Okay, so it's a structural difference. Is that like, kind of think that you're born with them, or you think that over time it happens? Over time it happens. So, yeah, I think that the common thought process is that muscles will begin to shorten, tendons begin to be stiffer, but in reality, a lot of times when we have all this tension, like Sarah was talking about, in something like the hamstring, it's the depressurization of something else, or it's just another joint not doing its job, and so it creates all this tension somewhere else. Now I'm going to give you an example because I know that sounds weird. Alright, this is called a tensegrity model. This is a pelvis, alright, so between all these four little things right here, this is my pelvis. Boom. These are my legs, so this is my femur. In the front is my quad, and the back is my hamstring. Quad, hamstring. Since I just named it that way, I'm going to turn it around, even though it's the same both ways. So that when we're talking about the hamstring, you can see what I mean. If this is my hamstring, and this is normal tension, this is my pelvis, this is normal pressure, I take away the stability and pressure of my pelvis, and it starts to become weak. All of a sudden, the hamstrings are on full tension. So if I change the stability of all this by sitting a lot, I create what feels like a lot of tightness in all of this. The reason I tell you that is because I'm going to give you guys some things that don't seem like a stretch, but will help you feel much more flexible, be much more efficient, because we gave you something at a different joint that allowed you not to have to compensate so much somewhere else. If I take away the strength and stability of all the muscles around my spine, I will, in fact, be overusing something else, and what will feel very tight, filled with tension somewhere else. Okay? So we're going to work on creating more pressurization of our spine, the center of our body, because it will create all this tension in extremities. So I want you to be ready to kind of learn how to create that pressurization and understand why we're doing that. I may not be giving all of you guys a hamstring stretch today, but I am going to give you a solution to your hamstring tightness. Okay? And that will come from working on the middle of the body, the most important, the center. Okay? And that just goes to show where you have tension and tightness, or the feeling of tension and tightness, isn't always where the problem lies. Okay? Real quick example. So my brother tore his meniscus, ACL, MCL, all of it, LCL, PCL.
Knee.
Yeah. So he did that over and over and over. What we found later on, which no one assessed his other joints, what we found later on is that he had a really, really big ankle asymmetry right to left. And which side did you tear your knee up on?
Right.
On his right. He had a really, really big asymmetry right to left, and it caused him to always compensate, bear more weight on his right. It wasn't just an acute thing where he hurt his knee. It was overuse over time, and because of that ankle asymmetry, he put more stress on the right side and ended up hurting his right side. Not just once, not just twice, but what, 3 times? 4 times? 4 times. Thank God we found it now. So now that we've tackled that ankle asymmetry, he's much less susceptible to an injury. And that just goes to show you where the tension is not always where the problem lies. So we're going to be testing different joints. You may feel something in your knee, but it might be something that's actually, the compensation might be in your ankle. All right, and then the last little bit that I want to talk about is we're trying to give you guys the most available routes of patterns. So the most efficient movers won't move the same way twice. They'll do different, they'll give themselves more availability, more variety, so that they have different ways to move so they don't overuse. If I'm doing 150 air squats, or maybe I'm doing Karen, 150 wall balls, my body has tightness and tension and compensations all over the place. I'm a very imbalanced person, and so the way I squat is always the same. Let's just say I squat like this. This is the way I squat. I'm going to do it 150 times this way. And that's because I've programmed myself to always move in that pattern because I haven't really worked on my variability. And so I'm going to clearly, you can see from the way I'm doing the squat right here, I'm going to clearly stress out my knees. But I'm also going to create overuse of certain muscle groups. So those of you that are here and you always feel sore right here, you probably know, man, I'm really overusing this muscle group. How do we start to spread out some of the tension and start to work on different muscles and open up your variability? Well, we start to give you more of a versatile toolbox of movements. We start thinking about movement a little differently. So today I'm going to have you do a little bit of kind of a movement flow so you can understand that squatting like this, the way that we teach in class, because we want you to be safe, is not the only way to squat. We can have different movement variability in our practice and start working on stressing our joints in different ways so that we're more versatile, we're more used to the stress, and then when the stress occurs, we're not susceptible to it. Okay? So all of these things are going to be covered today. Since it's an hour seminar, it kind of happens quickly, but now you kind of get an idea of the complexity of what we're doing, but the total idea is improve the efficiency to improve your output.